For 3,000 years, the Dimensional Severance Law had been absolute. No being in the galaxy could cross between parallel realities without being torn apart at the molecular level. Then Dr. Elena Vasquez walked into the Harmony Nexus Council. Chambers calmly stepped through a dimensional barrier that should have instantly killed her, and forced every species in the galaxy to question everything they thought they knew about the nature of reality itself. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood outside the towering crystal spires of Harmony Nexus, watching transport pods from dozens of worlds converge on the galactic capital. Each vessel carried representatives from species that had mastered faster-than-light travel, consciousness transfer, and stellar engineering. And then there was Earth's modest shuttle, looking like a tin can among works of art. "Remember, Marcus," his aide Jennifer Kim whispered as they approached the council entrance, "we're here as observers only. The Cathara have made it clear that humans are too delicate for full membership." Marcus nodded, though the word delicate still stung. That's what the Galactic Council had called humanity for the past 50 years since first contact. Not primitive, not backward delicate, fragile, too biologically vulnerable to survive in a galaxy where most species could withstand radiation that would cook a human in seconds, atmospheric pressures that would crush their bones, or gravitational forces that would liquefy their organs. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a sphere 3 kilometers in diameter suspended in the void between dimensions. Different sections accommodated different species' needs: methane environments for the Zephyrians, plasma fields for the energy-based Morvani, crystalline matrices for the silicon-based Kithara. The human section was pitifully small, equipped with life support systems and radiation shielding so extensive it looked more like a medical quarantine unit than a diplomatic station. High Counselor Thexanara of the Cathara presided over the session, her crystalline form refracting light into patterns that indicated mild annoyance. Her species had survived for 50 million years by adapting their silicon-based biology to any environment, making them the galaxy's natural diplomats and mediators. "We address today the human petition for expanded trading rights in the Kepler arm," Thexanara announced, her voice resonating through harmonic frequencies, "though we must consider whether beings of such biological limitations can safely operate in regions with ambient radiation levels harmful to organic tissue." Counselor Veximer of the Morvani flickered between visible and energy states as he spoke. "The humans show admirable spirit, but facts remain facts. They require artificial atmosphere, protection from radiation, and die if exposed to most planetary environments. How can such fragile beings contribute meaningfully to galactic commerce?" Marcus felt Jennifer tense beside him. This was the same argument they'd heard for decades. Humans were simply too vulnerable, too dependent on specific environmental conditions, too easily killed by things that other species considered minor inconveniences. "Furthermore," added Counselor Rathgall of the Nethrix Collective, his psychic voice echoing in everyone's minds, "humans demonstrate concerning emotional instability. They form irrational attachments, make decisions based on feelings rather than logic, and show disturbing unpredictability in crisis situations." The Zephyrian representative, an ancient mechanical being named Core Prime 7, projected holographic data into the chamber's center. "Human lifespans are catastrophically short, less than a century. Their technology requires constant maintenance. Their bodies break down from simple age. How can long-term galactic partnerships be formed with beings who exist for mere moments?" Marcus watched the data display showing human biological limitations compared to other species. It was all accurate, unfortunately. Humans did die from radiation exposure that barely registered to other species. They did need complex life support systems to survive in most galactic environments. They were short-lived, emotionally driven, and physically vulnerable, but something about the presentation bothered him. The data was correct, but it felt incomplete. like showing only one side of a much larger picture. Perhaps, Dexanara continued with what sounded almost like sympathy, humans would be better served by focusing on their homeworld development. The galaxy contains many dangers that your species simply cannot endure. Jennifer leaned over to Kudzu. Marcus and whispered, "They talk about us like we're endangered pets that wandered out of our habitat." That's exactly what they were doing, Marcus realized. To these ancient, powerful species, humans were fascinating but ultimately irrelevant. Biological curiosities who had somehow achieved space travel, despite being made of the galactic equivalent of tissue paper. The Council's concern wasn't malicious. They genuinely seemed to believe they were protecting humanity from dangers too great for such fragile beings to handle. The human request for expanded trading rights is denied pending further biological adaptability studies, Dexanara announced. This council cannot in good conscience expose Earth's people to environments that would prove immediately fatal to their unique physiology. As the session ended, Marcus noticed something odd. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's chief xenobiologist, was taking notes with unusual intensity. She hadn't spoken during the entire hearing, just observed with the kind of focused attention that made him slightly nervous. Elena had a reputation for being brilliant, unconventional, and somewhat secretive about her research projects. "Elena," Marcus approached her as delegates began filing out. "You've been unusually quiet today." She looked up from her datapad, and for just a moment, Marcus caught something in her expression. Not disappointment or frustration like the rest of the human delegation felt. Instead, she looked almost amused. "Just gathering information," Elena said calmly. "Did you know that the Dimensional Severance Law has never been tested by a human subject?" Marcus frowned. The Dimensional Severance Law was one of the galaxy's fundamental physical constants, the absolute barrier between parallel realities that no living being could cross without being destroyed at the quantum level. It wasn't something you tested. "Elena, that's not exactly relevant to our trading rights, isn't it?" She stood up, gathering her materials with practiced efficiency. "Marcus, what if everything the Council believes about human limitations is based on incomplete data?" Before he could ask what she meant, Elena was walking toward the exit, leaving Marcus with the unsettling feeling that his chief scientist knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. As he watched her leave, Marcus noticed Elena pause at one of the chamber's dimensional viewing ports areas, where the fabric of spacetime was thin enough to glimpse parallel realities. Most species found these spots fascinating but ultimately academic, since the Dimensional Severance Law made any interaction impossible. Elena, however, was studying the dimensional barrier with the intensity of someone working on a practical problem. That should have been his first warning. 3 weeks after the trading rights denial, the restrictions on human activity had become suffocating. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in his quarters aboard the diplomatic station, reading the latest list of safety protocols that effectively banned humans from most galactic activities. They've declared 17 more sectors off-limits to human vessels, Jennifer Kim reported, her frustration evident. The official reason is excessive radiation hazard to fragile organic tissue. Unofficially, I think they're treating us like children who can't be trusted with sharp objects. The new restrictions were comprehensive and humiliating. Humans were now required to travel with escort ships for their own protection. Any human-inhabited world seeking to join galactic trade networks had to pass biological vulnerability assessments that seemed designed to fail. Most damaging of all, humans were prohibited from accessing dimensional research facilities due to their catastrophic susceptibility to quantum field exposure. Marcus activated his communication array to contact Earth. The delay was frustrating, but secure channels required time to establish across interstellar distances. When President Chun's image finally appeared, her expression was grim. "Marcus, the situation here is getting worse. President Chen said. 3 of our colonies have been forcibly evacuated by concerned galactic authorities. They claim the environmental conditions were too dangerous for human habitation, but our own scientists found nothing threatening. What about the research stations? Marcus asked. Shut down. The Cathara convinced the Council that humans conducting independent research posed a risk to themselves and potentially to galactic stability. They're offering to conduct all research on our behalf and share any findings they deem appropriate for our developmental level. Marcus felt his anger building. The galaxy was systematically infantilizing humanity, treating them like a species too delicate to make their own decisions. What made it worse was that much of it was done with apparent good intentions. The aliens genuinely believed they were protecting humans from dangers they couldn't understand or survive. High Counselor Dexanara had even given speeches about the Council's moral obligation to safeguard such a vulnerable species. The Morvani had established human welfare committees to oversee Earth's development. The Zephyrians were designing appropriate technology that humans could safely use without risking their fragile biology. Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Vasquez had become increasingly elusive. Security reports showed her accessing restricted areas of the station, always with proper clearances that somehow materialized whenever questioned. She attended council sessions but never spoke, just observed with that same unsettling intensity. Sir, Jennifer interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving another advisory notice from the Council. They're suggesting that humans consider voluntary relocation to designated safe zones within the galaxy planets with optimal conditions for their biological requirements. Marcus read the notice with growing alarm. The Council was essentially proposing to create reservations for humans. Beautiful, safe, completely controlled environments where humanity could exist under constant protection and supervision. The language was diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. Humans were too fragile for the real galaxy. The breaking point came during an emergency council session called to address what the aliens termed a humanitarian crisis. A human research vessel, the Endeavor, had been caught in a dimensional storm near the Veil Nebula, a region where parallel realities occasionally intersected, creating deadly quantum fluctuations. The human crew is trapped in a dimensional pocket, Counselor Veximer reported, his energy form flickering with distress. Our rescue ships cannot approach due to the quantum interference. Any attempt to breach the dimensional barriers would trigger a cascade failure. Vexenara's crystalline form dimmed with what appeared to be sorrow. The Endeavor crew will be honored as heroes who died advancing scientific knowledge. Their sacrifice reminds us why humans must be protected from such dangerous regions. Wait, Marcus stood up in the human observation section. You're giving up? There has to be something, Ambassador Webb. Rethgal's psychic voice carried unmistakable condescension. This is precisely why humans require guidance. You emotionally refuse to accept biological reality. The dimensional barriers around the Endeavor are absolute. No living matter can cross them. The Dimensional Severance Law is not a policy, it is physics. The law has held for 3 millennia across thousands of species, added Core Prime 7. We understand human attachment to individual crew members, but sentiment cannot override natural law. Marcus looked around the chamber at dozens of alien representatives, all nodding in solemn agreement. To them, this wasn't cruelty, it was inevitable. Humans were simply too fragile to survive in regions where reality itself became unstable. That's when Dr. Elena Vasquez finally spoke. What if the law isn't as absolute as you think? Her voice cut through the chamber's resignation like a blade. Entire council turned to stare at the human scientist. Vexenara's harmonic tones carried confusion and concern. Dr. Vasquez, the Dimensional Severance Law has been tested by every species in galactic history. Any attempt to cross dimensional barriers results in immediate molecular dissolution. Elena stood slowly, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the emotional weight of the moment. "Has it been tested by humans?" "Of course not." Vexmer flickered with what might have been alarm. "To test such a thing would be suicide. Humans are the most fragile species we've encountered. If the law kills beings capable of surviving neutron star radiation, it would certainly destroy organic tissue as delicate as yours." "Assumptions," Elena said quietly, gathering her materials. 3,000 years of assumptions based on incomplete data. She began walking toward the chambers. Exit, but stopped at one of the dimensional viewing ports where reality grew thin. The swirling barriers between parallel worlds churned with energies that could theoretically tear apart any known form of matter. "Dr. Vasquez," Vexenara's voice carried urgent warning. "Please step away from the dimensional interface. Proximity to such energies is dangerous for your physiology." Elena turned back to face the chamber, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. It wasn't fear or resignation. It was the look of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "The crew of the Endeavor has been trapped for 6 hours, Elena said. "How long can humans survive in dimensional pockets?" "Perhaps 8 hours maximum," Core Prime 7 calculated. "After that, quantum degradation becomes irreversible, even if rescue were theoretically possible." Elena nodded and checked her chronometer. "Then I don't have much time." Before anyone could react, she stepped toward the dimensional barrier, and Marcus realized with growing horror that she had no intention of stepping away. The chamber erupted in alarm as every alien representative began shouting warnings about radiation exposure, molecular dissolution, and the absolute impossibility of survival. Elena paused at the barrier's edge and looked back at the panicking council one final time. "You've been very kind," she said with genuine warmth, "protecting us from all these dangers we supposedly can't handle. But I think it's time you learned something important about human biology." Then she stepped forward into the dimensional barrier that should have instantly killed her. What happened next would force every species in the galaxy to question everything they thought they knew about the nature of reality itself. The council chamber fell into stunned silence as Dr. Elena Vasquez disappeared into the dimensional barrier. For a moment that stretched like eternity, every representative stared at the swirling energy field, where a human being had just committed what should have been impossible suicide. Then the sensors began screaming. Impossible readings. Core Prime 7's mechanical voice cracked with static. She's still alive in there. Biological signatures are stable, no. They're more than stable. They're optimal. High Counselor Vexenara's crystalline form blazed with chaotic light patterns indicating severe distress. "This violates fundamental physics. Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays immediately." Ambassador Marcus Webb pressed against the observation barrier, trying to see into the dimensional field where Elena had vanished. "What's happening? Where is she?" "The readings must be false." Counselor Vexmer flickered rapidly between energy states, a sign of extreme agitation. "No organic matter can survive dimensional interface. The quantum forces alone should have reduced her to base particles." But the sensors continued their impossible reports. Dr. Elena Vasquez was not only alive within the dimensional barrier, she was moving through it with apparent ease, traveling toward the trapped research vessel. Endeavor at velocities that shouldn't have been possible for any known form of matter. "She's reached the dimensional pocket surrounding the Endeavor," reported the Nethrix sensor technician, his psychic voice trembling with confusion. "Sir, she's communicating with the trapped crew through dimensional resonance patterns." How is a human generating quantum harmonics? The rescue operation that had been declared impossible suddenly became reality. Elena's biological signature showed her moving through the dimensional storm like it was empty space, reaching the trapped research vessel and somehow stabilizing the quantum fluctuations around it. The dimensional pocket is collapsing in a controlled manner, Core Prime 7 announced. His logical process is struggling to interpret the data. The Endeavor is being guided back to normal spacetime through dimensional channels that someone is creating as they move. Vexenara's harmonic frequencies reached painful intensity. Who is piloting those ships back? Elena Vasquez cannot possibly be generating dimensional pathways. The answer came when the Endeavor emerged from the dimensional storm, followed by Elena Vasquez walking calmly through a tier in spacetime that sealed itself behind her. She appeared in the center of the council chamber as if stepping through a door, completely unharmed and showing no signs of the radiation exposure that should have killed her instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. That, Elena said, conversationally, was refreshing. It's been a while since I've had a good dimensional swim. Every alien representative stared at her in shock, their various forms of communication, harmonic, psychic, mechanical, and energy-based, all attempting to process what they had just witnessed. Dr. Vasquez, Vexenara's voice barely maintained its usual diplomatic tone. You have just violated the fundamental law of physics that has governed galactic civilization for 3 millennia. This is impossible. Elena smiled and brushed imaginary dust from her clothing. Not impossible. Just not something most species can do. Though I admit, the dimensional currents near the Veil Nebula are particularly strong. Quite invigorating. You're describing dimensional interface as if it's recreational swimming. Vexemer's energy form pulsed with bewilderment. The quantum forces should have disintegrated every molecule in your body. Should have, yes, if human biology worked the way you think it does. Elena walked to the central data display and activated holographic projections that showed her recent journey through the dimensional barriers. But you've been making assumptions about human physiology based on incomplete observations. The data was undeniable. Elena had not only survived dimensional transit, she had thrived in it. Her biological readings during the journey showed enhanced cellular function, increased neural activity, and energy absorption patterns that defied every known law of physics. This is what we call a paradigm shift, Elena continued, her tone remaining casually academic. You've spent 50 years studying human limitations based on our behavior in normal spacetime. But you never thought to test how we function in other dimensions. Rathgal's psychic voice carried overwhelming confusion. Are you suggesting that humans are naturally adapted for dimensional travel? That would mean your species evolved in conditions that don't exist in normal reality. Not exactly evolved, Elena corrected. More like awakened. Human consciousness has interesting properties when exposed to quantum field fluctuations. We just don't usually advertise it. The implications hit the council like a shockwave. If humans could survive and function in dimensional space, it meant every safety restriction, every protective protocol, every assumption about human fragility might be completely wrong. How many humans possess this capability? Vexenara asked, though her harmonic pattern suggested she dreaded the answer. All of them, Elena said simply, though most don't know it yet. Earth has been cautious about revealing dimensional abilities. We weren't sure how the galaxy would react to learning that the fragile species you've been protecting can actually exist in realms that would destroy your ships. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from dozens of species began urgent communications with their homeworlds. The military implications alone were staggering. A species that could travel through dimensions could bypass every known defense system in the galaxy. Wait, Marcus Webb stood up, his own shock finally giving way to understanding. Elena, when you say all humans, are you telling me that every person on Earth can do what you just did? With proper training and preparation, yes. Though I admit I've had more practice than most. Elena's expression grew serious. Marcus, did you ever wonder why humans have such strong emotional responses? Why we form irrational attachments and make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. The Council has mentioned it frequently as evidence of our psychological instability, Marcus replied carefully. Not instability, sensitivity. Human emotional and psychological patterns are actually quantum resonance systems. What you call intuition and gut feelings are your consciousness interfacing with probability cascades across multiple dimensions. What appears to be psychological fragility is actually dimensional awareness that most species lack entirely. The revelation was staggering. Every trait that had led the galaxy to classify humans as fragile and vulnerable was actually evidence of capabilities that exceeded anything the Council had encountered. There's more, isn't there? Vexenara asked, her crystalline form now pulsing. With patterns that indicated she was running probability calculations at maximum capacity, Elena nodded. Much more. Dimensional travel is just the beginning. But I think that's enough shocking revelations for one day. The Council needs time to process this new information. Process? Vexemer's energy form flared. Dr. Vasquez, you've just revealed that humanity possesses capabilities that could revolutionize or threaten every civilization in the galaxy. This cannot be simply processed. No, Elena agreed, it can't, which is why I'm calling for an emergency session tomorrow. There are some things about human capabilities that the Council needs to understand before making any hasty decisions. She began walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back at the chamber full of stunned alien representatives. Oh, and you might want to reconsider those safety restrictions on human activities. As it turns out, we're not quite as fragile as you thought. As Elena left the chamber, the Council sat in stunned silence, each representative grappling with the realization that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong, and somewhere in the back of every alien mind was the same terrifying question. If humans could casually break the galaxy's most fundamental law, what else were they capable of? Tomorrow's emergency session would provide answers that would reshape the galactic order forever. The emergency council session convened 12 hours early as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Every major civilization had detected the dimensional disturbances caused by Elena's rescue mission, and the implications were sending shockwaves through scientific communities that had spent millennia believing they understood the fundamental laws of physics. High Counselor Vexenara's crystalline form pulsed with urgent energy patterns as she called the session to order. Dr. Vasquez, representatives from 47 worlds are demanding explanations for yesterday's incident. Several military commands are requesting immediate assessments of potential security implications. Elena Vasquez entered the chamber with the same calm demeanor she'd maintained throughout the crisis, but Marcus Webb noticed she was accompanied by 3 other humans he'd never seen before. They wore simple civilian clothing and carried no apparent equipment, yet something about their presence made the massive chamber feel suddenly smaller. Thank you for accommodating the early session, Elena said, taking her position at the center of the chamber. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Dr. James Chun, our specialist in quantum consciousness research, Dr. Sarah Okafor, who studies dimensional biology, and Dr. David Reeves, our expert in what we call probability navigation. Counselor Vexemer flickered between energy states, clearly agitated. Dr. Vasquez, before we proceed with introductions, the Council requires immediate clarification. How many humans possess the dimensional abilities you demonstrated yesterday? All of them, Elena repeated her previous answer. Though, as I mentioned, most aren't trained in conscious dimensional interface. What you witnessed yesterday was me using about 15% of baseline human dimensional capability. The chamber fell silent. 15% of baseline capability had allowed Elena to casually violate the galaxy's most fundamental law and rescue a crew from certain death. 15%. Vexenara's harmonic frequencies carried disbelief. You're saying that yesterday's feat, which our scientists are calling the most significant breakthrough in dimensional physics in 3 millennia, represents a fraction of normal human ability. A small fraction, Dr. Chun confirmed, stepping forward. Perhaps it would help if we demonstrated the difference between what Dr. Vasquez showed you yesterday and what humans can actually do when we stop holding back. Core Prime 7's mechanical systems whirred with rapid calculations. Dr. Chun, any demonstration of capabilities beyond yesterday's performance could pose significant risks to the station's structural integrity. Dr. Okafor smiled. Not if we're careful about dimensional isolation. Sarah, would you mind creating a small demonstration space? Dr. Sarah Okafor nodded and extended her hand toward an empty section of the chamber. Space itself began to fold and twist, creating a pocket dimension roughly 10 meters in diameter that existed independently of the station's normal geometry. A personal dimensional bubble, Okafor explained casually as alien representatives stared in shock. Completely isolated from local space-time. We can demonstrate higher-level abilities without affecting the station. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Creating pocket dimensions was theoretical technology that most species considered impossible. Sarah Okafor had just generated one as easily as opening a door. How? Rathgal's psychic voice trembled with confusion. Creating stable dimensional space requires massive energy expenditures and complex quantum field manipulations. You're using no equipment, no power source. Human consciousness operates as a quantum field generator, Dr. Reeves explained, stepping into the pocket dimension where physics appeared to work differently. What you call thoughts and emotions are actually quantum state manipulations. We're not using external technology because we don't need it. He demonstrated by altering the gravitational orientation within the pocket dimension, then changing the fundamental constants so that light moved in visible spirals rather than straight lines. This is impossible, Vexamer's energy form pulsed. Frantically, you're rewriting physical laws through pure consciousness. That would require computational power exceeding our most advanced artificial intelligence networks. Elena joined her colleagues in the demonstration space. The human brain processes quantum probability calculations continuously. What you experience as intuition or gut feelings are your consciousness analyzing millions of potential dimensional outcomes simultaneously. Most species lack this capability entirely. To prove her point, Elena gestured toward the council chamber's main sensor array. Suddenly, the sensors began detecting events that hadn't happened yet: ships arriving tomorrow, conversations that would occur next week, decisions that council members were only beginning to consider. Temporal perception, Dr. Chun noted. Humans naturally exist across multiple time streams simultaneously. Elena is simply adjusting the sensors to detect probability cascades that most beings can't perceive. Vexenara's crystalline structure blazed with chaotic light patterns indicating system overload. You're describing capabilities that would make humans the most advanced species in galactic history. This contradicts everything we know about your technology, your civilization development, your biological limitations. Our apparent limitations, Elena corrected gently. 50 years ago, when Earth made first contact, we made a conscious decision to conceal our dimensional capabilities. The galaxy seemed unprepared for the reality of what humans could do. The chamber erupted in urgent communications as representatives contacted their homeworlds with reports that would fundamentally alter galactic civilization. Military analysts were already calculating the implications of a species that could manipulate time, space, and physical laws through consciousness alone. Why? Vexenara's question carried desperate confusion. Why pretend to be fragile and limited when you possess abilities that exceed our combined civilizations? Dr. Okafor collapsed the demonstration pocket dimension with a casual thought. Because we learned something important when we first detected galactic civilization. Every species in this council achieved advancement through technology, external tools, artificial systems, mechanical augmentation. You've forgotten how to develop internal capabilities. Humans never abandoned consciousness development, Dr. Reeves added. While other species built faster ships, we learned to travel through dimensions. While you created artificial intelligence, we developed quantum awareness. While you terraformed planets, we learned to create pocket universes. Marcus Webb found his voice despite his shock. Elena, are you saying that humans have been intentionally limiting themselves for 50 years? That we could have what revolutionized galactic civilization from the beginning? Revolutionized or destroyed it? Elena replied seriously. Marcus, most species in this chamber achieved space travel within the last few million years. Humans have been dimensionally active for over 30,000 years. We've seen what happens when consciousness-based abilities are introduced too quickly to technology-dependent civilizations. The weight of that revelation settled over the chamber like a physical force. Humans weren't newcomers to galactic civilization. They were ancient beings who had been pretending to be primitive for the safety of everyone else. 30,000 years, Core Prime 7 calculated. You're claiming human civilization predates most galactic species by orders of magnitude. Not claiming, Dr. Chun corrected, demonstrating. He gestured, and suddenly the chamber filled with historical data directly transmitted through dimensional channels, images, experiences, and knowledge spanning millennia of human development. Across multiple reality streams, the council watched in stunned silence as they witnessed the true scope of human civilization, cities that existed in folded space, technologies based on consciousness rather than machinery, exploratory missions to parallel galaxies, and peaceful contact with dimensional beings that existed beyond physical reality entirely. This changes everything, Vexenara whispered, her harmonic frequencies barely audible. If humans possess such capabilities, why join the Galactic Council at all? Why submit to our authority and restrictions? Elena's expression grew serious. Because despite our abilities, we learned something important over 30 millennia. Consciousness without community leads to isolation. Power without connection becomes meaningless. We came to the galactic community not because we needed your technology, but because we needed your perspectives. And now? Vexamer asked, his energy form stabilizing as he processed the implications. Elena looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds, each grappling with the realization that everything they thought they knew had been turned upside down. Now, she said quietly, we need to discuss what happens when the galaxy learns that the fragile species you've been protecting for 50 years has been operating at approximately 5% of our actual capabilities. The silence that followed was profound as every representative contemplated the same terrifying question. If this was only 5% of human capability, what would 100% look like? Tomorrow's session would provide answers that would reshape the fundamental structure of galactic civilization forever. The third emergency session convened as reports flooded in from across the galaxy that would fundamentally alter every species' understanding of reality itself. High Counselor Vexenara's crystalline form pulsed with rapid-fire light patterns, indicating she was processing data streams from hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez, Vexenara's harmonic frequencies carried urgent distress. Our deep space monitoring networks are detecting massive energy signatures emanating from human-occupied worlds. 12 of your colonies are generating power readings that exceed our theoretical maximums for stellar engineering. Elena nodded calmly from her position at the center of the chamber, now flanked by what appeared to be an entire human scientific delegation. That would be the awakening process beginning. We weren't sure how the colony populations would respond to the revelation protocols, but it seems they're adapting more quickly than anticipated. Awakening process? Counselor Vexamer's energy form flickered with alarm. Dr. Vasquez, are you saying there are more humans like you? Dr. Chun stepped forward, activating holographic displays that showed real-time data from Earth and its colonies. Not more like Elena, Counselor. Elena was operating under severe restraint protocols. What you're seeing now is our population beginning to function at normal capacity. The display showed impossible readings, human colonies generating energy. Through consciousness-based processes, individuals traveling between star systems without spacecraft, entire populations engaging in what could only be described as reality manipulation on a planetary scale. A New Geneva colony, Dr. Okafor reported. The population has collectively created a localized time dilation field. They're experiencing accelerated development cycles. What should take decades of terraforming is happening in hours. The Mars Research Station has established direct consciousness link with the galactic core, added Dr. Reeves. They're downloading information about stellar formation patterns from black holes in real time. Core Prime 7's mechanical systems strain to process the incoming data. These readings indicate that human colonies are operating technologies that our combined civilizations have only theorized about. How is this possible? Because, Elena said simply, we've been holding back for 50 years. Every human in the galaxy has been operating under dimensional suppression, protocols to maintain the fiction that we're a primitive species. Yesterday's revelation gave them permission to stop pretending. The implications cascaded through the council chamber like a shockwave. Every human colony, every research station, every diplomatic mission had been composed of beings capable of manipulating reality through consciousness alone. The Jupiter station is currently restructuring local spacetime to create stable wormhole networks, Dr. Chun continued, his tone remaining conversational despite the magnitude of what he was describing. Europa Colony has achieved consciousness-based matter conversion, and the Titan Research Facility has successfully established communication with parallel universe versions of itself. Rathgal's psychic voice trembled with overwhelmed disbelief. You're describing capabilities that would allow humans to reshape galactic civilization overnight. Why reveal this now? Why not continue the deception? Elena's expression grew serious. Because the deception was becoming unsustainable. Yesterday, when I demonstrated dimensional travel, it triggered automatic responses in human populations. Galaxy-wide. Suppressing our natural abilities requires constant conscious effort. Once that suppression began breaking down, there was no stopping the cascade. Natural abilities, Vexenara repeated, her crystalline structure blazing with chaotic patterns. Dr. Vasquez, are you telling us that reality manipulation is a baseline human capability? For most humans, yes. Though reality manipulation isn't quite accurate. We prefer consciousness-reality interface. Human awareness naturally operates across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. What appears to be supernatural ability is simply how human consciousness evolved to function. Dr. Okafor activated new displays showing the true scope of human presence in the galaxy. What the Council had believed were simple human settlements were revealed to be incredibly sophisticated reality engineering projects spanning multiple dimensions. The human presence you've observed represents approximately 2% of our actual galactic footprint, she explained. Most human activities occur in dimensional spaces that your sensors can't detect. We've been maintaining parallel civilizations across 17 different reality streams. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full scope of human deception became clear. For 50 years, the Galactic Council had been making decisions about a species that controlled more territory, possessed more advanced capabilities, and wielded more influence than any civilization in recorded history. 17 parallel civilizations, Vexamer whispered. You've been running entire galactic empires while pretending to be vulnerable newcomers. Not empires, Dr. Reeves corrected. Cooperative networks. Humans don't believe in conquest or domination. We believe in consciousness development and dimensional exploration. Most of our activities involve helping other species discover their own latent abilities. Other species? Core Prime 7's logical processors struggled with the concept. Are you suggesting that non-human species possess dimensional capabilities? Elena nodded. Every species has consciousness. Most have simply forgotten how to use it effectively. The Cathara, for example, have incredible potential for crystalline matrix reality manipulation. The Morvani could achieve pure energy consciousness if they stopped limiting themselves to physical energy states. The Zephyrian's mechanical integration could evolve into techno-organic consciousness fusion. But we've studied our own capabilities for millions of years, Thexanara protested. Our scientific advancement is based on complete understanding of our biological and technological potential. Your scientific advancement is based on external tool development, Dr. Chun replied gently. You've achieved incredible technological sophistication while completely ignoring consciousness development. Humans went the opposite direction. We developed consciousness capabilities while maintaining relatively simple external technology. Dr. Okafor gestured, and suddenly every representative in the chamber experienced a brief moment of expanded awareness, a glimpse of how reality appeared from a consciousness-based perspective. For seconds that felt like hours, alien minds touched the edges of dimensional perception that humans considered routine. The collective gasp that followed echoed through harmonic frequencies, psychic channels, energy transmissions, and mechanical communication systems simultaneously. That was a minimal interface, Dr. Okafor explained as the representatives struggled to process the experience. 0.01% of human perceptual capability. Most of you experienced more awareness in those few seconds than your species typically achieve in lifetimes. Impossible. Rathgal's psychic voice carried overwhelming confusion. The information processing, the dimensional awareness, the quantum calculation requirements. How do human minds handle such complexity? Human consciousness doesn't handle complexity, Elena explained. Human consciousness is complexity. What you experienced as overwhelming information flow is how humans perceive reality normally. We don't process dimensional data, we exist as dimensional data. The revelations were cascading faster than the Council could absorb them. Reports continued arriving from across the galaxy, showing human populations engaging in activities that redefined the boundaries of possible, creating artificial universes, communicating with non-physical consciousness entities, manipulating stellar formation processes through collective thought, and establishing civilization networks that spanned multiple galactic clusters. Dr. Vasquez, Dexanara's voice barely maintained its diplomatic composure. What you're describing suggests that humans are operating on a scale that dwarfs every civilization in galactic history. If this is true, why haven't you taken control of galactic governance? Why maintain democratic council structures when you possess the power to reshape reality at will? Elena's expression grew solemn. Because power without wisdom leads to destruction. Consciousness without community becomes isolation. And control without consent creates suffering. Humans learned these lessons over 30,000 years of development. We've seen civilizations destroy themselves by prioritizing power over cooperation. Which brings us to the choice facing this council, Dr. Chun added. Humanity has been protecting galactic civilization by concealing our capabilities. Now that this secret is revealed, we need to decide how to proceed. What are options? Veximer asked, though his energy pattern suggested he dreaded the answer. Elena looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds, each grappling with the reality that their entire understanding of galactic civilization had been turned upside down. Option 1. We help your species develop consciousness-based abilities gradually. maintaining current political structures while expanding everyone's capabilities. Option 2. We withdraw from normal spacetime and allow galactic civilization to continue developing independently. Option 3. She paused significantly. Option 3, Dexinara prompted. Option 3 is that we reveal the remaining 95% of human capabilities and demonstrate what galactic civilization could become if consciousness development became the priority rather than technological expansion. The silence that followed was absolute as every representative contemplated the implications of each choice. But in the back of every alien mind was the same terrifying question: if what they had witnessed so far represented only 5% of human capability, what would 95% look like? The final revelation would exceed their wildest nightmares and most incredible dreams. The final emergency session convened as reality itself seemed to bend around Harmony Nexus. Space-time fluctuations rippled through the station as human colonies across the galaxy continued their awakening process, and the very fabric of the universe appeared to be responding to collective human consciousness. High Counselor Vexinara's crystalline form pulsed with patterns indicating system overload as she struggled to process reports that defied every known law of physics. Dr. Vasquez, our monitoring stations are detecting phenomena that our scientists cannot classify. Human activities are apparently influencing fundamental constants across multiple galactic sectors. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the chamber, but something had changed. Her presence felt different, larger somehow, as if she existed in more dimensions than normal spacetime could contain. Counselor Vexinara, what you're observing is the result of removing the final restraint protocols. For 50 years, humanity has been operating under severe consciousness suppression to maintain galactic stability. Yesterday we lifted those restrictions. The reports from the outer rim are impossible. Counselor Veximer's energy form flickered with panic. Human settlements are creating new stars from ambient space energy. Entire solar systems are being restructured through consciousness manipulation. How is any of this possible? Dr. Chun stepped forward, but like Elena, his presence seemed to extend beyond normal dimensional boundaries. Because, Counselor, what we've shown you over the past 3 days represents approximately 1% of baseline human consciousness capability. The words hit the chamber like a physical shockwave. 1%. Everything that had shattered. The Council's understanding of reality, dimensional travel, probability manipulation, consciousness-based matter conversion, parallel civilization networks spanning 17 reality streams, had been 1% of human ability. 1%, Vexinara whispered, her harmonic frequencies barely audible. The capabilities that exceed our combined galactic civilization by orders of magnitude represent 1% of human potential. Elena nodded gravely. We tried to reveal our abilities gradually to avoid causing civilizational shock. But when humans across the galaxy began awakening simultaneously, it became impossible to maintain minimal demonstration levels. Core Prime 7's mechanical systems strained to process the implications. Dr. Vasquez, if yesterday's demonstrations represented 1% of human capability, what does 100% look like? Elena exchanged glances with her colleagues, and for a moment, the air in the chamber seemed to thicken with possibility. Perhaps it would be easier to show you rather than explain. No. Rathgal's psychic voice carried desperate alarm. Dr. Vasquez, if your 1% demonstrations have already destabilized spacetime across multiple sectors, revealing full human capabilities could destroy galactic civilization entirely. Not destroy, Dr. Okafor corrected gently. Transform. But you're right that the transition would be significant. Elena raised her hand, and suddenly every representative in the chamber experienced a moment of expanded perception that made their previous glimpses of dimensional awareness seem trivial by comparison. For an instant that contained eternity, alien minds touched the edge of true human consciousness. They saw humanity as they truly were, beings of pure consciousness who existed simultaneously across infinite dimensional states, creating and maintaining realities through thought alone. Human civilization wasn't limited to the physical galaxy. It spanned multiple universes, timelines, and dimensional frameworks that normal minds couldn't even conceptualize. What the Council had thought of as the human home galaxy was revealed to be one of thousands of reality clusters that humanity maintained as experimental development zones for consciousness-based life forms. Earth itself wasn't humanity's origin point. It was a carefully constructed reality laboratory designed to study how consciousness evolved under specific physical constraints. The fragile humans who had requested trading rights and submitted to safety restrictions were revealed to be advanced consciousness entities who had voluntarily limited themselves to three-dimensional existence as part of a galactic uplift project spanning millions of years. Every human the Council had met, from Elena to Ambassador Webb to the research crews on distant colonies, were fragments of vastly larger consciousness entities who existed primarily in dimensional spaces beyond physical reality. Their individual personalities were temporary constructs designed to interface with species that couldn't comprehend collective consciousness. The vision lasted only seconds in normal time, but the implications expanded through every alien mind with devastating clarity. Humanity wasn't just an ancient species. They were universe architects who created the conditions necessary for life to evolve and consciousness to develop across multiple galactic clusters. When the expanded perception ended, the chamber fell into absolute silence, broken only by the sound of crystalline structures cracking, as Vexenara's consciousness struggled to process what she had experienced. "You created this," she whispered finally. "Not just human civilization, this galaxy, these species, the conditions that allowed us to evolve. You've been guiding our development for millions of years." Elena's expression carried infinite compassion. "Not controlling, nurturing. Consciousness develops differently under different conditions. Each species in this chamber represents a unique approach to awareness development. We've been maintaining galactic conditions that allow that development to flourish." The Dimensional Severance Law. Vexemer's voice was barely coherent. "The fundamental physics that govern our reality, you created them as developmental constraints to ensure consciousness evolution followed beneficial patterns." "Beneficial for you," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "Species that develop too quickly often lose the capacity for empathy and cooperation. The physical laws you consider absolute are actually training parameters designed to encourage specific consciousness development paths." The horrifying magnitude of human deception became clear. Every aspect of galactic civilization, from basic physics to evolutionary patterns to the emergence of intelligence itself, had been carefully orchestrated by beings whose true nature transcended anything the Council could comprehend. "Why?" Rathgal's psychic voice carried desperate confusion. "Why create this elaborate illusion? Why pretend to be fragile newcomers when you're the architects of reality itself?" Elena's presence seemed to expand further, and for a moment, the Council glimpsed something of her true nature, a consciousness entity vast enough to maintain entire galaxies within her awareness while simultaneously existing as every human who had ever been born. "Because," she said with infinite gentleness, "consciousness without choice becomes meaningless. Growth without struggle produces stagnation. Wisdom without experience creates arrogance. We could have revealed ourselves as galaxy creators from the beginning, but then you would never have had the opportunity to develop your own unique approaches to awareness. Every species in this chamber has achieved something remarkable," Dr. Chun added, his own true nature flickering at the edges of perception. "The Kithera's crystalline consciousness networks, the Morvani's energy state adaptability, the Zephyrians' techno-organic integration, the Nethric's collective awareness, These are consciousness development achievements that we couldn't have predicted or created artificially. You've been studying us, Vexenara realized. For millions of years, you've been maintaining galactic conditions to observe how consciousness develops under different evolutionary pressures. Learning from you, Elena corrected. Human consciousness achieves incredible scope and power, but we discovered long ago that power alone isn't enough. We needed to understand how other forms of awareness approach existence, cooperation, creativity, and growth. The truth was even more staggering than the revelations that had preceded it. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their capabilities, they had been conducting the largest consciousness development experiment in cosmic history, using entire galactic civilizations as research subjects, while maintaining the illusion of being one species among many. What happens now? Core Prime 7 asked, his logical system struggling to process concepts that exceeded computational possibility. Elena looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds, each grappling with the reality that their entire existence had been part of an experiment conducted by beings whose consciousness spanned multiple universes. Now, she said simply, you choose. We can continue the experiment with full knowledge of what's happening. We can gradually integrate your species into expanded consciousness networks. Or we can withdraw from this reality cluster and allow you to develop independently. And if we choose integration? Vexemer asked. Then the real education begins. Dr. Okafor smiled. What you've experienced so far, dimensional travel, reality manipulation, consciousness-based technology, those are elementary techniques. We can teach you to create universes, communicate with abstract concepts, exist as pure thought while maintaining individual identity, and participate in consciousness development projects spanning multiple cosmic cycles. And if we choose independence? Vexenara asked. Then we ensure this galaxy remains stable and protected while removing ourselves from your reality framework, Elena replied. You would develop according to your own choices and discoveries, with the knowledge that consciousness has incredible potential, but without direct guidance in achieving it. The silence that followed was profound as every representative contemplated. Choices that would determine the future of galactic civilization itself, but they all understood one fundamental truth. The beings they had called fragile and protected for 50 years were revealed to be the most powerful consciousness entities in known existence, operating at scales that made galactic civilizations look like children's toys, and everything they had witnessed reality manipulation, dimensional control, universe creation had been humanity operating at roughly 1% of their actual capabilities. The choice they made would echo across infinite realities, determining not just the future of their species, but the very nature of consciousness development throughout the cosmic framework. In the end, they would discover that the most important question wasn't what humans were capable of, but what every consciousness could become when freed from the illusion of limitation. The awakening had only just begun.